Tonight I'm going to tell you about the most shocking murder of the Kofi 20th century, the assassination of the most beloved woman on earth of killing so perfectly executed that for 27 years the world believed it was an accident. But what if I told you that the driver had impossible levels of poison in his blood, yet was filmed acting completely normal minutes before? What if I revealed that key witnesses were found dead with bullet holes in their heads? What if I showed you that the ambulance took exactly 1 hour to travel 4 miles passing 2 hospitals that could have saved her life? What if I told you that she predicted her own death in writing? 10 months before that night in Paris, Diana Spencer wrote these exact words: "My husband is planning an accident in my car brake, failure and serious head injury. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a documented investigation into the most successful cover-up in modern history. Tonight we begin a journey that will reveal exactly who killed Princess Diana and why they had to silence her forever. So, turn off the lights, get comfortable, because what you are about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about the woman who dared to challenge the most powerful family on earth. Close your eyes and imagine it is August 30th, 1997. The most famous woman in the world sits in her suite at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. She picks up the phone and calls her butler back in London. "I do not want to be here," she says. "I want to come home. I am crawling the walls." But then she says something that will haunt her butler for the rest of his life. "Promise me you will be there when I get back." Why would the Princess of Wales need such desperate reassurance? Why did she sound so afraid? What did she know that we did not? To understand that night in Paris, we must first understand the extraordinary life that led to it. Diana Frances Spencer was not just a princess. She was a revolution in human form, a woman who dared to challenge the most powerful institution on earth, and she paid the ultimate price for her courage. But her story begins long before she became a threat, long before she became a target. It begins with a little girl who learned early that love could not be trusted. Diana Frances Spencer entered this world on July 1st, 1961, in a grand estate in Norfolk, England. Born into British nobility, she seemed destined for a life of privilege and comfort. But from the very beginning, her story was marked by abandonment and longing. Picture a 6-year-old girl with golden hair and sad blue eyes, standing at a window watching her mother drive away, never to return. Picture that same child growing up in a mansion so vast she could wander for hours without seeing another soul. The Spencer family had served the British crown for over 5 centuries. They were courtiers, advisors, and loyal servants to the monarchy. Diana's great-great-great-grandfather had been a close friend of King George III. The Spencers were not just nobility. They were embedded in the royal establishment from birth. But privilege does not protect children from pain, and Diana's childhood was defined by a trauma that would shape everything about her future. When Diana was just 6 years old, her world exploded. Her mother, Frances Spencer, left the family home for another man, Peter Shan Kidd. The divorce that followed was not just bitter, it was brutal. It became a public spectacle that tore the Spencer family apart. In aristocratic circles, divorce was still scandalous in the 1960s, but this divorce was different because it involved children in custody and a family deeply connected to the royal establishment. The battle for Diana and her siblings became a war between traditional values and modern desires. The most devastating betrayal came from Diana's own grandmother. Ruth Fermoy was one of the Queen Mother's closest friends and confidants. When the custody case went to court, Ruth testified against her own daughter. She sided with tradition over maternal love. She chose the establishment over her family. This betrayal wounded Diana in ways that would never fully heal. Her own grandmother had abandoned her, just like her mother. Diana learned early that even family could not be trusted. That love was conditional, that she could be discarded if she became inconvenient. The abandonment was so traumatic that Diana would later say it felt like her mother had died. She would spend the rest of her life desperately seeking the maternal love she lost at such a tender age. This wound created in her a pathological fear of being abandoned again, a fear that would make her vulnerable to manipulation and control Diana. Father Edward Spencer was a cold, distant man who struggled to show affection to his children. After the divorce, he quickly remarried Rain McCorkadale, a woman the Spencer children despised. They nicknamed her Acid Rain because of her harsh treatment and social climbing ambitions. Rain saw her marriage to Earl Spencer as her ticket into the highest levels of British society. She was more interested in redecorating Althorpe House and hosting grand parties than in caring for her step-children. Diana learned early that she could not rely on the adults in her life for love or protection. At Riddlesworth Hall boarding school, Diana was desperately homesick. She would cry herself to sleep every night, missing her mother, who she was only allowed to see during holidays. The other children teased her about her parents' divorce, which was still considered scandalous in aristocratic circles. The school was typical of British boarding institutions, cold, institutional, focused on breaking down individual personality and rebuilding children into proper representatives of their class. Diana struggled with the harsh discipline, the emotional isolation, the complete lack of privacy or personal freedom, but it was at school that Diana first discovered her extraordinary gift for empathy. She had an almost supernatural ability to sense when other people were suffering. She could walk into a room and immediately know who was sad, who was lonely, who was in pain. This empathy was both a blessing and a curse. It made her beloved by those who knew her, but it also meant she absorbed everyone else's emotional burdens as if they were her own. Diana felt responsible for other people's happiness in a way that was both beautiful and destructive. Her academic struggles made everything worse. Diana had severe dyslexia, which went undiagnosed for years. Teachers thought she was lazy or stupid, when in reality she was struggling with a learning disability that made reading and writing extremely difficult. This academic failure destroyed her already fragile self-confidence. Diana would later say that she felt stupid for most of her childhood. She believed she was less intelligent than her siblings, less worthy of attention, less deserving of love. This deep-seated sense of inadequacy would follow her throughout her life, but there was something special about Diana that her teachers noticed. She had a natural gift for caring for others, especially those who were vulnerable or marginalized. At West Heath Girls' School, Diana found some refuge working with elderly people and disabled children during charity visits. She would spend hours sitting with lonely old people, just listening to their stories. She had infinite patience with children who had special needs. She never seemed to tire of helping others, even when she herself was struggling. Her teachers wrote in her reports, "Diana has a natural gift for serving others, but she severely lacks self-confidence." This assessment would prove to be prophetic. Diana's gift for service would make her the most effective royal ambassador in history, but her lack of confidence would make her easy prey for those who wanted to exploit her. When Diana was 14, her father inherited the ancient title Earl Spencer, and the family moved to Althorpe House. The house was magnificent, with 550 years of history, priceless art treasures, and thousands of acres of land. Suddenly, Diana was Lady Diana Spencer, but the title only brought more pressure. Diana was now expected to marry well to continue the Spencer legacy of serving the crown. Her future was not her own to decide. It belonged to the institution that had shaped her family for generations. Diana was being groomed, whether she knew it or not, to become royal breeding stock. Her bloodline, her age, her naive personality all made her perfect for the role that powerful forces were already planning for her. What Diana did not know was that her grandmother, Ruth Fermoy, was reporting back to the Queen Mother about her development, character, temperament, suitability. For royal life, Diana was being evaluated, assessed, prepared for a role she did not even know she was auditioning for. But first, Diana had to complete her education, or what passed for education among the aristocracy. She struggled academically, failing her O-levels twice and leaving school at 16 without any qualifications. This was a humiliation for an aristocratic family whose children were expected to excel her. Parents sent her to a finishing school in Switzerland, hoping to prepare her for her role as an aristocratic wife. The Institut Alpen-Weidmanet was designed to turn wealthy young women into perfect wives for powerful men. Students learned languages, cooking, flower arranging, and most importantly, how to be decorative and compliant. But Diana was miserable away from home. She had never been comfortable away from familiar surroundings, and the formal atmosphere of the Swiss school made her feel trapped and isolated. She returned to England after just 6 weeks. Another failure in her parents' eyes. Back in London, Diana took a small flat in Earl's Court with 3 roommates. For the first time in her life, she tasted something approaching freedom. She got a job at the Young England nursery in Pimlico, earning just £5 a day. Diana Spencer, heir to millions, was earning less than minimum wage, but she did not care. Finally, she was doing something she was good at: caring for children. The little ones adored her. Parents respected her. For the first time since her mother left, Diana felt useful, loved for who she was, rather than what she represented. Diana work at the nursery revealed her true nature. She was patient, kind, endlessly creative in finding ways to help children learn and grow. She never lost her temper, never showed favoritism, always put the children's needs first. This was the real Diana, the woman who would later revolutionize the monarchy. But even as Diana was finding happiness in her simple life, powerful forces were positioning her for a very different future. The Spencer and Windsor families had been intertwined for generations. Both families knew that Diana's bloodline, her age, and her personality made her perfect royal bride material. Stage was being set for what would appear to be a chance romantic encounter, but was actually a carefully orchestrated meeting between 2 of the most powerful families in Britain. Diana was about to meet the man who would change her life forever and destroy it. Summer 1980, Lady Diana Spencer was 19 years old and working at a London nursery. Her life was simple, quiet, almost ordinary. She had no idea that she was about to be thrust into the most famous love story of the 20th century. Meeting between Diana and Prince Charles has been portrayed as a chance encounter, but nothing about it was accidental. Charles was 32 years old and under enormous pressure from his family, the government, and the press to find a suitable wife and marry. Charles had been having an affair with Camilla Shand, now Camilla Parker Bowles, since 1970. She was the love of his life, his soulmate, the woman he truly wanted to marry. But there was a problem. Camilla was not suitable for a future. King Camilla had been married before she was divorced. She was considered damaged goods by the royal establishment. The Church of England would not approve the marriage. The government would not support it. The public would not accept it. Charles needed a different kind of wife, someone young enough to have several children, someone virginal enough to be above scandal, someone noble enough to be accepted by the establishment, someone naive enough to accept the limitations of royal life. Diana Spencer checked every single box. The meeting was arranged through Diana's older sister Sarah, who had been dating Charles herself in 1977. Sarah would later boast of playing Cupid between Diana and Charles, proudly claiming credit for bringing them together. But was this really innocent matchmaking or something more calculated? The Spencer family had served the British monarchy for centuries. They understood how the system worked. They knew what the royal family needed, and they had a 19-year-old daughter who was perfect for the role. Diana grandmother Ruth Fermoy was one of the Queen Mother's closest confidants. She had been watching Diana development, carefully reporting back about her granddaughter character, temperament, and suitability. For royal life, Diana was being evaluated without her knowledge when Charles met Diana at Althorpe House in July 1980. He was not looking for love. He was looking for a solution to his marriage problem. Diana represented duty, obligation, a way to fulfill his constitutional requirements while maintaining his real relationship with Camilla. The courtship that followed was brief and carefully managed. Charles would take Diana on supervised outings, always with other people present. He never allowed real intimacy to develop, never shared his true feelings, never gave her any indication of what their marriage would really be like. Charles saw this courtship as a necessary performance. Diana saw it as the beginning of her fairy tale. She was young, inexperienced, desperately hungry for love and attention. Charles represented everything she had dreamed of since childhood. Charles' heart belonged to someone else. It always had, and it always would, even as he was courting Diana. He was maintaining his relationship with Camilla. They spoke on the phone regularly, met secretly, continued their emotional and physical affair. The contrast between Charles' public courtship of Diana and his private devotion to Camilla reveals the calculated nature of the entire arrangement. Diana was being set up for a marriage that was doomed from the start. Charles' behavior during the courtship should have been a warning. He was distant, formal, more interested in duty than in getting to know Diana as a person. He never asked about her dreams, her fears, her hopes for the future. He saw her as a function, not as a human. But Diana was too young and too hopeful to recognize the signs. She interpreted Charles' attention as love. She believed that once they were married, he would open his heart to her. She thought she could make him love her the way she already loved him. Engagement announcement in February 1981 triggered a media frenzy unlike anything the world had ever seen. Diana went from complete anonymity to global superstardom overnight. Every detail of her life became public property. Her childhood, her education, her family, her friends, everything was scrutinized, analyzed, judged. Diana was completely unprepared for this level of attention. She had no training in dealing with the media, no understanding of how to protect herself from their intrusion. The royal family provided minimal support, basically throwing her to the wolves and expecting her to figure it out on her own. The engagement period should have been the happiest time of Diana's life. Instead, it became a nightmare disguised as a dream. Diana was moved into Clarence House under police protection. Her freedom was gone. Her privacy disappeared. She was now property of the state, and investment that had to be protected. During this time, Diana began to discover the truth about Charles' relationship with Camilla. She found evidence that her fiancé was emotionally involved with another woman. Photos, letters, personal items that proved Camilla was still the most important woman in Charles' life. When Diana confronted Charles about this, he dismissed her concerns. He called her jealous and paranoid. He told her she was imagining things. He made her feel crazy for noticing what was obvious to anyone with eyes, but Diana was not imagining anything. The evidence was right there in front of her. Charles was not emotionally available for marriage because his heart belonged to someone else. Diana was entering a contract, not a love story just. Days before the wedding, Diana discovered the most devastating evidence of all. Charles had ordered a gold bracelet for Camilla. Engraved with their pet names Gladys and Fred, it was his farewell gift to her before his marriage of duty. When Diana begged Charles not to give the bracelet to his former lover, he brushed off her concerns. "It is just a friendship," he said. Just good manners. Diana knew it was much more than that. She knew she was marrying a man who loved someone else. The night before her wedding, Diana had a complete emotional breakdown. She wanted to cancel the ceremony, run away, escape from what she now understood was a trap. But her sisters told her it was too late. "Your face is already on the postage stamps," Sarah said. The wedding had become too big to stop. Diana was trapped by the machinery of state, by the expectations of millions, by the weight of tradition. Diana spent the night before her wedding crying, barely sleeping, trying to come to terms with the fact that she was about to marry a man who did not love her. She knew about Camilla, knew that her marriage was a sham, but she also knew there was no escape. July 29, 1981. St. Paul Cathedral in London was the setting for what appeared to be the most romantic wedding in history. 750 million people around the world watched as Lady Diana Spencer married Prince Charles in a ceremony of unprecedented grandeur. Diana looked like every little girl dream of a princess. Her dress was a masterpiece of design, ivory silk taffeta with a 25-foot train, 10,000 pearls, and antique lace. The dress was so magnificent that it seemed to transform Diana into a living fairy tale. The ceremony itself was perfect. Every detail had been planned and rehearsed. The music was sublime. The flowers were breathtaking. The atmosphere was magical. For those watching, it seemed like the ultimate celebration of love and romance. But Diana later said it was the worst day of her life. She felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. She was walking down that endless aisle, knowing that she was entering a marriage built on lies. The wedding dress itself told the story of Diana trapped. The enormous train required an army of assistants to manage the puffy sleeves, made her look like a child playing dress-up. The dress was beautiful, but it also seemed to swallow Diana whole, just as the royal institution would soon do. When Diana spoke her vows, she was so distraught and nervous that she made a significant mistake. She called Charles Philip Charles Arthur George instead of Charles Philip Arthur George. Was this a simple error caused by nerves, or was her subconscious mind rejecting this union? Charles also made a telling omission from his vows. He deliberately left out the traditional promise to forsake all others. This was his way of keeping his options open, of maintaining his relationship with Camilla, even within the bonds of marriage. The kiss on the Buckingham Palace balcony became one of the most famous moments in history, but it hid a devastating truth. Charles had to be persuaded by Diana to kiss his new wife in front of the crowd. He found public displays of affection vulgar and inappropriate for a member of the royal family. The wedding reception was a formal affair with all the protocol and ceremony expected of a royal event, but those who were close to the couple could see the tension. Diana was already withdrawing into herself. Charles was going through the motions without any real emotion. The guest list itself revealed the duplicity at the heart of the occasion. Camilla Parr Bowles was there, watching the man she loved marry another woman. She knew, as everyone in the inner circle knew, that this marriage was a charade. The honeymoon began with a cruise in the Mediterranean on the royal yacht Britannia. It should have been the most romantic time of their lives. Instead, it became Diana's introduction to life with a man who saw her as a burden. Charles brought stacks of books on philosophy, art, and history. He was more interested in reading than in getting to know his new wife. When Diana tried to engage him in conversation, he would respond with monosyllables or change the subject entirely. Diana discovered that Charles had brought photos of Camilla on their honeymoon. Hidden among his personal belongings were reminders of the woman he really loved. Diana realized with growing horror that she was just an intruder in Coder. Charles and Camilla love story. The yacht was supposed to be their private sanctuary, but even there, Diana felt watched and judged, the crew reported. Everything back to royal headquarters. Diana had no privacy, no freedom, no escape from the machinery of the monarchy. It was during this honeymoon that Diana's eating disorder began in earnest. Unable to control anything else in her life, she began controlling what she ate. Bulimia became her secret companion, her way of expressing the pain she could not speak aloud. Diana would eat normally in front of Charles and the crew, but then disappear to the bathroom to vomit everything up. This became a daily ritual, sometimes happening 5 or 6 times a day. The bulimia was her way of punishing herself for not being good enough for Charles' love. When the honeymoon ended and they returned to London, Diana's isolation became complete. They moved into apartments at Kensington Palace, a beautiful building that felt more like a prison than a home. Charles immediately returned to his bachelor lifestyle. Late nights out, mysterious weekend trips, constant communication with Camilla. Diana was left alone in rooms that felt empty and cold, despite their grandeur. The servants were polite but distant. They reported everything Diana did back to Charles, private secretary who passed information along to the royal family. Diana's every move was monitored, her phone calls listened to, her mail read. Diana began to understand that she was not just a princess, she was a prisoner. Her life was not her own, it belonged to the institution that had created her. She had no privacy, no freedom, no control over her own existence. Life at Kensington Palace was nothing like Diana had imagined. The apartments were grand, but they felt hollow, empty of warmth or genuine affection. Diana found herself alone for hours at a time with nothing to do but think about how miserable she was. Charles maintained his pre-marriage routine as if nothing had changed. He would leave early in the morning for official engagements or private meetings with Camilla. He would return late if at all, often staying overnight at friends' houses without explanation. Diana was expected to fill her days with appropriate royal activities, charity work, official visits, ceremonial duties, but she was given little guidance or support. She was thrown into the deep end of royal life and expected to swim. The loneliness was crushing. Diana had gone from living with roommates and working with children to being isolated in a palace with only servants for company. She missed her simple life at the nursery where she had felt useful and appreciated. Charles showed no interest in Diana's emotional needs. When she tried to talk to him about her unhappiness, he would dismiss her concerns or change the subject. He seemed to view her sadness as an inconvenience that interfered with his own plans. The royal family attitude toward Diana was formal and unwelcoming. They treated her as an outsider who needed to prove herself worthy of their acceptance. Diana felt like she was constantly being tested and constantly failing. Queen Elizabeth was distant and judgmental. The Queen Mother was polite but cold. Princess Margaret was openly hostile. Diana had hoped to find a surrogate family, but instead she found critics and competitors. The pressure to conform was enormous. Diana was expected to follow hundreds of years of tradition and protocol. She was told how to dress, how to speak, how to behave in every situation. Her individual personality was seen as a problem to be solved. But the most devastating aspect of royal life was the complete lack of privacy. Diana could not make A phone call, go shopping or visit a friend without it being reported back to palace officials. She was under constant surveillance by people who were supposed to be helping her. Diana began to suspect that her phones were being tapped. Her conversations had strange echoes and clicking sounds. Her mail seemed to arrive opened and resealed. She felt like she was being watched even in her most private moments. Paul Burrell, who became Diana Butler and closest confidant, witnessed her growing paranoia. Many times Diana would say to him, "Look underneath the carpet. Can you see if there's anything unusual under there? Can you see a tracking device?" They would pull up floorboards in Diana private rooms, looking for electronic surveillance devices. Diana would have Paul take apart telephones, unscrew electrical outlets, search for hidden microphones and cameras. Diana's fears were not paranoid delusions. They were based on real evidence. The intelligence services were indeed monitoring her communications, tracking her movements, building detailed files on her activities. They justified this as security measures, but it was really about control. Discovery that she was being spied on by her own security team devastated Diana. She realized that she could not trust anyone, that even those who were supposed to protect her were actually watching her. For the royal family in late 1981, Diana became pregnant with her first child. She hoped this would bring her and Charles closer together, that they could finally become a real family. But instead, the pregnancy drove them further apart. Diana suffered from severe morning sickness, made worse by her developing eating disorder. She was losing weight when she should have been gaining it, but Charles showed no concern for her health or emotional state. Charles seemed to view the pregnancy as an inconvenience that interfered with his schedule and his relationship with Camilla. He made no effort to support Diana or make her feel loved and valued. During this vulnerable time, the royal family attitude toward Diana's pregnancy was purely functional. They were interested in the health of the future heir, not in Diana's well-being as a person. She was expected to produce a healthy child and otherwise stay out of the way. Diana's depression deepened during the pregnancy. She felt like a breeding animal whose only value was her ability to produce heirs. She was trapped in a loveless marriage with no escape and no hope for happiness. In a moment of complete despair, Diana threw herself down the main staircase at Sandringham House while 3 months pregnant. It was not really a suicide attempt. It was a desperate cry for help, a way of saying, "Look at me. I am in pain. I need help. Please notice that I am dying inside." Charles witnessed this incident, and his reaction revealed everything about their relationship. Instead of rushing to help his pregnant wife, he stepped over her body and left the room, saying, "What a circus." This moment crystallized everything Diana needed to know about her marriage. Her suffering did not matter to Charles. Her life did not matter to Charles. She existed solely to produce heirs and smile for photographs. Everything else about her as a human being was irrelevant. Diana made several other suicide attempts during her pregnancy. Each one was a cry for help that went unanswered. She cut her wrists with razor blades, threw herself against glass cabinets, swallowed pills, always stopping short of real danger, but desperate to make someone notice her pain. The royal family response to these incidents was to provide Diana with psychiatric care, but only to make her functional, not to address the real source of her suffering. They wanted her to stop embarrassing them, not to find happiness or healing. William was born on June 21, 1982. In a blaze of media attention, Diana fell instantly and completely in love with her son. Finally, here was someone who would love her unconditionally, who would need her, who would not judge her or find her wanting. But even this joy was tainted by Charles' reaction to his firstborn son. Charles arrived at the hospital 2 hours after William's birth, looked at his son and said, He has red hair and looks like my mother, I hope with time he will look more like the Spencers." These words hurt Diana deeply. Even their precious child was not good enough, for Charles was already being judged and found wanting. Diana realized that Charles would never be a loving father anymore then. He was a loving husband. Diana refused to follow royal tradition and hand William over to professional nannies. She wanted to be a hands-on mother to give her son the love and attention she had never received. This decision horrified the royal establishment. But Diana was determined to break the cycle of emotional neglect. Royal children were traditionally raised by staff while their parents maintained a formal, distant relationship. But Diana could not bear the thought of abandoning her son the way she had been abandoned. She insisted on caring for William herself. 1984 brought the birth of Harry and an even worse reaction from Charles. He had been hoping for a daughter to complete the royal family. When he saw his second son, Charles said, "Oh, it is a boy, and he even has red hair," then immediately left the hospital to play polo. Diana heart shattered a little more with each of these cruel rejections. She was supposed to be living a fairy tale, but instead she was trapped in a nightmare with a man who seemed incapable of love, incapable of kindness, incapable of seeing her as anything more than a function. Charles' complete indifference to his sons revealed the depth of his emotional dysfunction. He was so consumed with his own needs, his relationship with Camilla, and his resentment toward Diana that he could not even pretend to care about his children. Diana poured all her love into William and Harry. They became her reason for living, her source of joy in an otherwise miserable existence. She was determined to give them the emotional warmth and stability that she had never received. But even her love for her children was used against her. The royal family made it clear that if Diana ever stepped too far out of line, she could lose access to her sons. The children became both her greatest joy and her greatest vulnerability as her marriage crumbled and her mental health deteriorated. Diana made a decision that would eventually change history. She began secretly recording herself, creating audio diaries that captured her thoughts, fears, and experiences in her own words. These recordings were made in the privacy of her Kensington Palace apartments using a simple tape recorder. Diana would pour out her heart, describing her daily life or interactions with Charles, her growing desperation and isolation. The recordings were explosive. Diana spoke candidly about her suicide attempts, describing in graphic detail how she cut her wrists with razor blades, how she threw herself downstairs, how she slashed herself with kitchen knives. She was documenting her own destruction. She talked about her bulimia, admitting that she vomited 5 times a day, that she had an obsessive relationship with food, that eating and purging had become her way of maintaining some small measure of control over her life. Most damaging of all, Diana revealed the truth about Charles and Camilla ongoing relationship. She described finding love letters, discovering secret meeting places, overhearing intimate phone conversations. "There were 3 of us in this marriage," she said, "so it was a bit crowded." But Diana was not just documenting her personal pain. She was also collecting evidence, building a case that could be used against the royal family if necessary. These recordings were her insurance policy, her way of ensuring that someday the truth would be told. Diana carefully planned how these recordings would be used. She gave them to her trusted friend, Dr. James Colthurst, who passed them to journalist Andrew Morton. Diana was orchestrating her own revelation, ensuring that her story would reach the public. But Diana was also documenting something else. Her growing conviction that she was being watched, followed, threatened by forces beyond just her husband. She spoke of phones being tapped, mail being intercepted, mysterious cars following her. Diana suspected that MI5 and MI6 were conducting surveillance operations against her. She believed that Charles and the royal family were using the intelligence services to monitor and control her. She was convinced that powerful forces were trying to drive her to a mental breakdown. The paranoia was not unfounded. Diana's fears were based on real evidence. The so-called Squidgegate tapes would later prove that her most intimate phone conversations were being intercepted, recorded, and would eventually be broadcast to humiliate her. Someone with sophisticated surveillance equipment was definitely listening to Diana's private communications. The official explanation that amateur radio enthusiasts had accidentally picked up the conversations was clearly false. The tapes had been professionally recorded using equipment that amateur radio operators would not have access to. They had also been enhanced and edited to highlight the most embarrassing segments. This was clearly the work of intelligence professionals. Diana was learning that she was not just trapped in an unhappy marriage. She was trapped in a system of surveillance and control that monitored her every move. Every phone call, every letter, every conversation was being recorded and analyzed. Despite her personal suffering, Diana was beginning to discover that she had real power in her public role. Her natural empathy and ability to connect with people was starting to revolutionize what it meant to be royal. Her early official engagements revealed a completely new approach to royal duties, where other members of the royal family maintained formal distance. Diana was warm, accessible, genuinely interested in the people she met. Children were immediately drawn to her. She would get down on their level, talk to them as equals, make them laugh and feel special. Elderly people responded to her kindness, finding in her someone who actually listened to their stories. Diana had an instinctive understanding of what people needed. She could sense suffering and respond to it in ways that were both comforting and healing. This gift made her incredibly effective as a royal representative, but Diana's natural warmth and accessibility also made her a threat to the established order. The royal family had maintained their mystique through distance and formality. Diana's humanity made them seem cold and outdated by comparison. 1987 became the year that everything changed. Diana visited Middlesex Hospital to open a new AIDS ward in a moment that would be remembered forever. She shook hands with an AIDS patient, without gloves, without fear, without hesitation. This simple gesture sent shockwaves around the world at a time when ignorance and fear dominated public understanding of AIDS, when many people believed you could catch the disease through casual contact. Diana's action was revolutionary. The photograph of Diana holding the hand of a dying man went global instantly. It destroyed years of misinformation and prejudice. In a single moment, AIDS organizations received an unprecedented influx of donations. Diana realized she had found her true calling. She could use her celebrity to help people who had been forgotten by society. She could bring attention to causes that others ignored. She could make a real difference in ways that went far beyond traditional royal duties. Diana began seeking out opportunities to help the marginalized and suffering. She visited homeless shelters, addiction clinics, hospitals for the mentally ill, prisons. Everywhere she went, she brought the same warmth and genuine concern. She would hug patients, sit on their beds, cry with grieving families. Her behavior was completely contrary to royal protocol, but it was also incredibly effective. She was connecting with people in ways that no royal had ever done before. The British public fell in love with this new kind of royalty. Diana received more fan mail than all the other royals combined. People lined the streets whenever she made public appearances. They felt like she understood them in ways that others in her position never had. Diana was becoming the people's princess, a title that perfectly captured her relationship with the public. She belonged to them in ways that transcended traditional royal roles. She was their representative, their champion, their voice. But Diana's growing popularity came at a cost. Charles grew increasingly resentful of being overshadowed by his wife. At public events, crowds would cheer for Diana and barely acknowledge Charles' presence. This wounded his pride and fueled his resentment. The royal establishment was also growing concerned about Diana's independence. She was supposed to support causes approved by the palace, arts, education, traditional charities. Instead, she was choosing her own causes, all the issues the royal family typically avoided: AIDS, victims, homeless people, drug addicts, the mentally ill, landmine victims. These were not subjects that the monarchy wanted to be associated with. Diana was making the royal family uncomfortable with her choices. But Diana did not care about royal protocol. She cared about helping people who were suffering. She had found her purpose, her mission, her reason for existing, and nothing was going to stop her from pursuing it. Diana's humanitarian work was not just about charity, it was about revolution. She was showing the world that royalty could be human, accessible, genuinely caring. This was a direct challenge to centuries of tradition and protocol. The royal family had always maintained their position through mystery and distance. They were supposed to be above ordinary human concerns, elevated beings who inspired awe rather than affection. Diana was destroying this carefully constructed image. Every time Diana hugged a patient, every time she cried with a grieving family, every time she got down on the floor to play with children, she was proving that royalty could be both majestic and human. This transformation of the monarchy was deeply threatening to those who benefited from the old system. Diana was making other roles look cold and out of touch by comparison. Her popularity was exposing their inadequacies. As Diana's public profile grew, so did the pressure on her private life. The media attention was relentless. Photographers followed her everywhere. Reporters investigated every aspect of her life. She had no privacy, no escape from the constant scrutiny. Diana began to understand that her fame was both her greatest asset and her greatest vulnerability. She could use it to help others, but it also made her a target for those who wanted to control or destroy her. The intelligence services were paying close attention to Diana's growing influence. They saw her popularity as a potential threat to the stability of the monarchy. Her ability to connect with people made her powerful in ways that traditional royals were not. Diana was also becoming more sophisticated in her understanding of how power worked. She began to see the connections between her personal suffering and the political forces that shaped her life. She realized that her marriage problems were not just personal, they were institutional. Charles' inability to love her was not just a character flaw. It was a product of a system that prioritized duty over humanity, that valued tradition more than individual happiness. Diana was trapped not just by an unloving husband, but by an entire way of life. This realization made Diana angry in a way she had never been before. She began to see herself not just as a victim, but as a potential agent of change. She could use her position, her popularity, her media savvy to challenge the system that had trapped her. Diana began to fight back more systematically. She started building alliances with journalists, developing relationships with photographers, cultivating sources within the palace staff. She was creating her own network of influence and information. She also began to document everything more carefully, keeping detailed records of her interactions with Charles recording conversations that revealed his cruelty and indifference. She was building a case not just for her own protection, but for eventual public revelation. Diana was transforming from a naive young woman into a sophisticated political operator. She was learning to use the media, learning to manage her image, learning to leverage her popularity for maximum impact. But as Diana became more dangerous to the establishment, the forces arrayed against her became more determined to stop her. The surveillance intensified, the pressure increased, the stakes grew higher with each passing day. 1992 brought the publication that changed everything. Andrew Morton. Diana, her true story hit bookstores like a nuclear bomb, exploding the carefully constructed facade of royal happiness and revealing the ugly truth beneath. The book was supposedly based on interviews with Diana, friends and confidants, but the truth was much more direct. Diana herself had provided the information through those secret recordings she had been making for years. For the first time, the world learned about Diana's suicide attempts, her bulimia, her lonely marriage, Charles' ongoing affair with Camilla, the cold cruelty of the royal family, their complete indifference to her suffering. The impact was immediate and devastating. The fairy tale marriage was revealed to be a nightmare. The perfect princess was shown to be a broken woman. The royal family carefully maintained image crumbled overnight. Diana had achieved something unprecedented. She had turned public opinion against the royal family, and in her favor. She had gone from being seen as a difficult princess to being viewed as a sympathetic victim. But this victory came at an enormous cost. Diana had crossed a line from which there could be no return. She had declared war on the most powerful family in Britain, and they would never forgive her for it. The royal family response was swift and ruthless. They launched a counterattack designed to destroy Diana's credibility and make her appear unstable. They used their media contacts to plant stories suggesting she was mentally ill. They portrayed her as an attention-seeking hysteric who was making up stories to get sympathy. They tried to make the public believe that Diana was the problem, not the royal family, but Diana was ready for this. She had anticipated their response and prepared her own counter-moves. She had more evidence, more recordings, more proof of their cruelty and neglect. The media war that followed was brutal. Both sides used every weapon at their disposal, leaking stories, planting rumors, trying to control the narrative. Diana's popularity with the public was her greatest asset, but the royal family had institutional power on their side. 1995 brought Diana's most devastating attack on the royal family. Her interview with Martin Bashir for the BBC Panorama program was watched by 23 million people in Britain and hundreds of millions worldwide. Sitting alone in front of the camera, Diana delivered the most damaging critique of the royal family ever broadcast. She confirmed her eating disorder, her suicide attempts, her affair with James Hewitt, but most explosively she questioned Charles' fitness to be king. She suggested that he might not be capable of handling the responsibilities of monarchy. She was publicly undermining the future head of state. "I would like to be a queen of people's hearts," she said, "rather than queen of this country." This was a direct challenge to the entire system of hereditary monarchy. She was proposing an alternative based on popular appeal rather than bloodline. The interview was Diana's declaration of independence from the royal family. She was no longer asking for their acceptance or approval. She was rejecting them entirely and appealing directly to the people. Reaction was immediate. Queen Elizabeth II ordered Charles and Diana to divorce as quickly as possible. The fairy tale was officially over, but the war was just beginning. Divorce negotiations were bitter and protracted. Diana was determined to maintain her status and her access to her children. The royal family wanted to strip her of everything and exile her from public life. Diana fought for every privilege, every title, every right. The negotiations revealed the extent of her transformation from naive young bride to sophisticated political operator. She had learned to use lawyers, media, public opinion as weapons. August 28, 1996, brought the final decree. Diana lost her title of Royal Highness, but retained her status as Princess of Wales. She received a substantial financial settlement, but more importantly, she kept her freedom for the first time since her marriage. Diana was truly independent. She could choose her own causes, speak her own mind, live her own life. The royal family no longer controlled her every move. Diana threw herself into humanitarian work with renewed passion. Her January 1997 visit to Angola to highlight the landmine crisis made headlines around the world. The image of Diana walking through a cleared minefield became iconic. She was using her freedom to maximum effect, showing the world what she could accomplish when she was not constrained by royal protocol. Her popularity soared to new heights as she demonstrated her commitment to helping others. But Diana's newfound freedom also brought new dangers. She no longer had the protection of the royal security apparatus. She was on her own in a world where powerful forces saw her as a threat. Diana's love life became the subject of intense speculation. Her relationship with Dr. Hasnat Khan, the Pakistani heart surgeon, was serious but doomed by the impossibility of privacy. Khan was everything. Charles was not intelligent, compassionate, genuinely caring about Diana as a person rather than as a symbol. He was not impressed by her title or her status. He loved her for herself, but Khan could not cope with the constant media attention that came with loving the most famous woman in the world. He was a private man who wanted a normal life. Diana was incapable of providing. Their relationship lasted 2 years, but ended when Khan realized he could never have a normal life with Diana. The constant surveillance, the media intrusion, the complete lack of privacy made love impossible. Diana was heartbroken by the end of this relationship. She had genuinely believed she had found true love, that she could build a real life with someone who cared about her as a person. The failure of her relationship with Khan left Diana more vulnerable than ever. She was desperately lonely, isolated from her family, estranged from her royal in-laws, searching for someone who could understand her unique situation. It was in this vulnerable emotional state that Diana met Dodi Al Fayed in the summer of 1997. The son of Mohammed Al Fayed, the controversial Egyptian billionaire who owned Harrods and the Ritz Hotel in Paris. Mohammed Al Fayed had been fighting the British establishment for years. His applications for British citizenship had been repeatedly rejected despite his massive investments in British businesses. Al Fayed believed the rejections were motivated by racism and class prejudice. The British establishment would never accept an Egyptian businessman, no matter how successful or wealthy he became. Invitation for Diana and her sons to vacation on the Al Fayed yacht was not innocent. Al Fayed saw an opportunity to strike back at the establishment that had excluded him. If his son could marry Diana, the mother of the future king, it would give the Al Fayed family a legitimacy and status that money alone could not buy. It would be the ultimate revenge against those who had rejected them. Dodi Al Fayed was 42 years old, a film producer and international playboy who had produced several Hollywood movies, including the Academy Award-winning Chariots of Fire. Unlike Diana's previous relationships, Dodi understood her world. He was used to luxury celebrity media attention. He did not seem intimidated by her fame or overwhelmed by the constant surveillance there. Romance developed quickly during their Mediterranean cruise. Dodi showered Diana with expensive gifts, jewelry, flowers, constant attention. After years of emotional neglect, Diana blossomed under this focused romantic attention. Paparazzi photos of their yacht romance were sold to newspapers worldwide for enormous sums. The couple seemed happy, relaxed, genuinely enjoying each other's company. But this relationship alarmed the British establishment in ways Diana may not have fully understood. Dodi was Muslim, the son of a man who had been openly challenging the British government and royal family for years. The idea of Diana, mother of the future king, marrying into the Al Fayed family was absolutely unthinkable to those in power. It would create political complications that the establishment was not prepared to handle. More troubling were the persistent rumors that Diana and Dodi were planning to announce their engagement. Mohammed Al Fayed later claimed they were discussing a November wedding just a few months away. If these rumors were true, Diana was about to create an alternative royal family that could overshadow the Windsors themselves. The prospect of Diana having children with Dodi was particularly alarming. The British public might find mixed-race half-siblings to the future king charming and attractive, especially if they were raised by Diana with her natural warmth and charisma. This scenario represented the ultimate nightmare for the royal establishment. Diana's popularity combined with Dodi wealth and international connections could create a power base that threatened the monarchy itself. As Diana's relationship with Dodi intensified, so did her fears about being watched and threatened. She told friends she felt constantly followed. Her apartment was swept for bugs regularly. Her phone conversations were full of static and strange noises. Confided to Paul Burrell, "They are trying to drive me crazy." But Diana's fears were not the product of a paranoid mind. They were based on real evidence of surveillance and intimidation. The intelligence services were indeed monitoring Diana around the clock. They were concerned about her relationship with Dodi, about her growing independence, about her potential to cause political instability. Diana was no longer just a troublesome royal, she was a security threat. Her knowledge of royal family secrets, combined with her popularity and media savvy, made her dangerous to the established ordering. October 1996. 10 months before her death, Diana wrote a letter to Paul Burrell that now seems chillingly prophetic. "I'm sitting here at my desk today in October, longing for someone to hug me and encourage me to keep strong and hold my head high. This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for Charles to marry." This letter reveals Diana's state of mind in the final year of her life. She was convinced that her life was in active danger from forces connected to the royal family and the intelligence services. The letter specifically mentions brake failure and serious head injury in a car accident, exactly the circumstances that would later kill her. Diana was not making random predictions. She was describing a plan that she believed was already in motion. Diana was not just worried about Charles. She had also sought legal advice about her safety. In 1995, she met with Victor Mishkin, one of London's most respected solicitors. In that meeting, Diana expressed specific fears that her husband wanted her out of the picture and was planning a motor accident. Mishkin was so concerned that he made detailed handwritten notes of their conversation after Diana's death. Mishkin took his notes to Paul Condon, the Commissioner of Police, the top policeman in Britain. But incredibly, Condon chose not to pass this information to the French investigators. Instead, he locked the notes in a safe at Scotland Yard. When Condon retired and John Stevens became commissioner, the notes were passed along, but Stevens did the same thing under English law. It is a crime not to tell a coroner if you have information about a sudden, unexplained, or suspicious death. Both men were breaking the law by concealing evidence. The note stayed hidden for 5 years until Paul Burrell sold his own letter from Diana to the Daily Mirror. Only when the Burrell letter was published did Scotland Yard finally admit they had similar evidence. This concealment of evidence for 5 years proves that there was a systematic cover-up involving the highest levels of British law enforcement. August 30th, 1997, brought the final phone call. Diana called Paul Burrell from the Ritz Hotel in Paris. Her voice was strained, unhappy, stressed. "I do not want to be here," she told him. "I want to come home. I am crawling the walls." Diana had originally planned to return to London that day to see William and Harry, who were back from their own vacation. She was stuck in Paris because Dodi had business to attend to for his father. "Promise me you will be there," Diana said to Paul with unusual intensity. "Of course I will be there. I am always there," Paul replied. "No, say it." "What do you mean, say it?" "I promise I will be there." That is all I wanted to hear. Those words would haunt Paul Burrell forever. Diana seemed to sense that something terrible was about to happen, as if she knew this might be their last conversation. Many people believed the real reason for their trip to Paris was for Dodi to collect an engagement ring he had custom designed for Diana. When journalists asked Diana if Dodi was spoiling her, she replied, "Yes, he has spoiled me. He has bought me a lovely watch, earrings, a bracelet, a necklace." Then she added with a knowing smile, "I said, oh my goodness, you know what is coming next. It is a ring." Evidence for an engagement ring is substantial. Dodi had been working with Alberto Rapazzi, an exclusive Parisian jeweler, to design a custom ring. The ring was reportedly a large emerald surrounded by diamonds, if Mohammed Al-Fayed is correct about the engagement timeline. Diana and Dodi had just 8 weeks to organize their new life together, but 8 weeks would have been more than enough time for their enemies to organize their elimination. August 30, 1997, 9:30 p.m. Dodi plans to take Diana for a romantic dinner at Benoit restaurant are ruined when paparazzi surround the establishment. The couple retreats to the safety of the Ritz Hotel. The paparazzi presence at the restaurant was unusually heavy that night, suggesting that someone had tipped them off about Diana and Dodi plans. The photographers were more aggressive than usual, almost as if they were being directed to make the couple feel trapped. Even inside the Ritz, they were not truly safe. Photographers with long lenses were positioned outside the hotel, taking pictures through windows. The couple felt hunted, constantly watched. They dined at the Hotel Imperial restaurant, but the atmosphere was tense. They knew they were surrounded by photographers, waiting for them to leave. The decision was made to go to Dodi apartment on Rue Arsène House, just a short distance away, to avoid the paparazzi. The security team devised what seemed like a clever plan. A decoy car would leave from the main entrance to attract the photographers, while Diana and Dodi slipped out the back entrance in a different vehicle. Henry Paul, the deputy head of security at the Ritz, was called back to the hotel to drive the Mercedes. This decision would later seem suspicious. Henry had finished his shift and gone home earlier in the evening, but he was summoned back specifically for this crucial assignment. Here is where the story becomes very strange. Henry Paul had left the Ritz around 7 p.m., supposedly to go home. He was called back around 10 p.m. to drive Diana and Dodi, but during those crucial 3 hours, Henry Paul never actually went home. Security cameras at his apartment building show he never arrived there. So where was he for 3 hours? What was he doing? Who was he meeting? The missing 3 hours in Henry Paul timeline are one of the key mysteries of that night when Henry returned to the Ritz. He appeared on CCTV footage looking perfectly normal. He was walking steadily, talking to people, bending down to tie his shoes, running up and down stairs. Showed absolutely no signs of being drunk or impaired by drugs. This contradicts the official story that would later emerge about his condition. At 12:20 a.m. on August 31st, the Mercedes S-280 left the Ritz through the rear entrance. Diana and Dodie were in the back seat. Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodie's bodyguard, was in the front passenger seat, and Henry Paul was driving. The Mercedes was an armored vehicle designed to protect its passengers from attack, but the armor would prove useless against what was about to happen. The initial plan worked. They left the hotel without being immediately followed. But the paparazzi quickly discovered the ruse and began pursuing the Mercedes through the streets of Paris. But not all the motorcycles following the Mercedes were paparazzi. Some of them may have been part of an assassination team posing as photographers. The chase intensified. Henry Paul accelerated, trying to lose their pursuers. The Mercedes was traveling at roughly 100 kilometers per hour as it approached the Pont del Alma tunnel. This was not an excessive speed for a vehicle of this type on an empty road. Henry Paul was an experienced driver who knew this route well. The speed alone should not have caused what happened next. Multiple witnesses would later report seeing something very strange in those final moments before the crash. Some claimed to have seen a bright flash of light just before the Mercedes hit the pillar. Others reported seeing a white Fiat Uno and motorcycles positioned near the Mercedes as it entered the tunnel. These vehicles seemed to be coordinating their movements. With the Mercedes at 12:23 a.m., the Mercedes slammed into concrete pillar number 13 with devastating force. The impact was so violent that the front of the armored vehicle disintegrated. The passenger compartment crumpled. Bodies were thrown with terrible force. The sound of the crash echoed through the tunnel like a gunshot. Henry Paul died instantly. The steering wheel crushed into his chest. Blood tests would later show impossible levels of alcohol and carbon monoxide in his system. But how could Henry Paul have had such high levels of toxins in his blood and still function normally just minutes before? The CCTV footage clearly shows him acting alert and coordinated. Dodie Al-Fayed also died immediately, his neck broken by the impact of the crash. His dreams of marrying Diana, of creating a new life together, died with him in that tunnel. Trevor Rees-Jones survived but suffered massive facial injuries and complete amnesia about the accident, the only witness to what really happened inside that car has no memory of the crucial moments. Diana was alive but critically injured. In the first moments after the crash, she was conscious and able to speak to rescuers. Photographer named Romuald Rat actually entered the vehicle, checked her pulse and told her help is coming. She was aware, responsive, alert enough to communicate. But what happened next raises serious questions about whether Diana's death was really an accident or something much more sinister. First police patrol arrived at the crash scene 12:30 a.m. Just 7 minutes after the impact. The first ambulance arrived shortly after, but then something inexplicable happened. It took more than an hour to extract Diana from the vehicle and get her to a hospital. During this crucial time, Diana went into cardiac arrest. Medics performed external CPR and managed to restart her heart. But why did it take so long to get her medical attention in most countries? The protocol is scoop and run, get the patient to the hospital as quickly as possible. But the French medical system emphasizes stabilization at the Pamba scene before transport. This difference in approach may have cost Diana her life, or it may have been used as cover for something more sinister. She was finally moved to an ambulance at 1:18 a.m., nearly an hour after the crash. The ambulance left the scene at 1:41 a.m. and arrived at Pity-Salpêtrière Hospital at 2:06 a.m. The journey that should have taken 5 minutes took 25 minutes. Even more puzzling, the ambulance passed two other hospitals that could have treated Diana injuries, Lariboisiere Hospital and Hotel DA. Both have excellent trauma facilities and are closer to the crash site, but the ambulance drove past them both at the hospital gates. The ambulance stopped for several more precious minutes before finally taking Diana inside. Why these delays? What was happening during this lost time? Paul Burrell, who went to Paris to collect Diana's body, describes what he saw. When I got to Paris, I was handed a see-through plastic bag of what were the prince's clothes, in which she died. I could not tell that they were clothes, because the bag was just full of blood. The amount of blood that Paul Burrell describes suggests that Diana's injuries were made much worse during the ambulance journey. What happened inside that ambulance must have been a massacre, Paul said. The excessive bleeding suggests that Diana may have been given drugs that prevented her blood from clotting despite 4 hours of surgery, massive transfusions, and cardiac massage. Diana died at 4 a.m. on August 31st, 1997. The most beloved woman in the world was gone. The official investigation would conclude that the crash was caused by Henry Paul drunk driving and excessive speed. But the evidence tells a very different story. Henry Paul blood contained 30% carbon monoxide, a level so high that he should have been unconscious or dead. Yet he had appeared completely normal just minutes before. Car airbags deploy, they do not release carbon monoxide. Fire officers at the crash scene confirmed there was no carbon monoxide present in the tunnels. Oh, where did this poison come from? The only explanation is that the blood sample came from someone else. Mohammed Al-Fayed believes the blood samples were switched as part of a massive cover-up. French officials needed Henry Paul to be blamed for the crash, so they used blood from a suicide victim. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a white Fiat Uno fleeing the tunnel immediately after the crash. 7 different people saw this car leaving the scene at high speed. Forensic evidence confirmed that this vehicle had collided with Diana Mercedes and that the collision was a significant factor in the crash. Paint samples from the Mercedes matched exactly with the type of paint used on white Fiat Unos, but despite massive resources, French police claimed they were unable to find this vehicle. How does a car simply vanish? Mohammed Al-Fayed investigators found the vehicle within months. It was being sold at a garage in October 1997. When they tried to buy it for forensic examination, they were told no for safety reasons, whose safety was never explained. The mystery deepens when we learn about James Anderson, a paparazzi photographer who owned a white Fiat Uno and was known to have been following Diana. And Dodie Anderson had been bragging to friends about being in the tunnel the night Diana died. He claimed to have photographs that would rock the world. On May 5, 2000, police found Anderson's body in his burned-out car in remote woods. The body was so charred it took nearly a month to identify him through DNA. The official story was suicide. Anderson had supposedly shot himself twice in the head and then set his body on fire too. Bullets to the head, then self-immolation. This would be physically impossible for a genuine suicide. A fire officer reported seeing what looked like 2 bullet holes in Anderson's skull. But the French judge ruled it suicide anyway. Anderson had been talking about his role in Diana's death. He was becoming a liability. His death silenced him permanently. Frederick Dard, a French crime writer who was friends with Anderson, died of a heart attack just 6 weeks later. Another potential witness eliminated Richard Tomlinson, a a former MI6 agent, believes Anderson was working as an informant for British intelligence. His job as a paparazzi photographer provided perfect cover. Richard Tomlinson revelations about MI6 are perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this entire story. Tomlinson worked for British intelligence until 1995 when he was fired. While at MI6, Tomlinson had seen documents outlining plans to assassinate Slobodan Milosevic, the Serbian president, by causing his car to crash in a tunnel. The method was very specific: use strobe lights to disorient the driver and cause him to crash into a pillar. When Tomlinson heard about Diana crash and the reports of a bright flash in the tunnel, he immediately made the connection. The method was identical to the assassination plan he had seen in I-6 files. The bright light, the tunnel, the pillar. It was exactly the same technique. Tomlinson tried to contact French investigators, but MI6 lied to French authorities, denying that any such plan existed. Later, in court, MI6 admitted they had lied to the French about this and other matters. Tomlinson's efforts to reveal the truth came at enormous personal cost. When he tried to travel to France to testify, he was arrested and imprisoned. After his release, he attempted to travel to New York for a television interview, but was arrested by the CIA at JFK and deported on September 2, 1998. Tomlinson was supposed to be on Swiss Air Flight 111 from New York to Geneva. Instead, he was deported on an earlier flight. Swiss Air Flight 111 crashed off the coast of Nova Scotia, killing all 229 passengers and crew. Was the plane targeted to eliminate Tomlinson? He believes so. Causing airplane accidents is a standard way intelligence services eliminate threats. Within hours of Diana's death, suspicious activities began that suggest a cover-up was already underway. Diana's body was embalmed without proper authorization. Under French law, paperwork must be completed before embalming a body that will be subject to post-mortem. The embalming was done first and paperwork completed afterward. This destroyed any forensic evidence that might have revealed the truth. The effect of embalming Diana's body with formaldehyde was to nullify any tests that might have been performed in Britain. Mohammed Al-Fayed believes Diana's body was deliberately embalmed to hide evidence that she was pregnant with doty child. Alan Power claims to have spoken with Dr. Elizabeth Dian, who allegedly saw a fetus in Diana's body, but when investigators tried to find Dr. Dian, it took them 9 days. When they finally obtained an affidavit from Dr. Dian, it made no mention of pregnancy or even being in Paris that night. Mercedes involved in the crash was also tampered with. The car had been stolen months before and returned in pristine condition, except the onboard computer chip was missing. This chip controlled navigation, acceleration, steering, and braking. Its absence prevented investigators from determining if the car had been sabotaged. Mercedes offered 3 times to inspect the vehicle. Each time they were refused. The car was eventually destroyed, making forensic examination impossible. In the aftermath, several key witnesses died under mysterious circumstances. The pattern suggests a systematic effort to silence anyone with knowledge. Diana had been collecting evidence against the royal family for years. Her secret recordings contained explosive revelations about Charles' treatment of her, but Diana was not just documenting personal suffering. She was gathering intelligence about surveillance and intimidation. She knew her phones were tapped, her mail was read, her movements monitored. She had created a private intelligence operation within Kensington Palace. Diana suspected MI5 and MI6 were conducting surveillance operations against her. She believed Charles and the royal family were using intelligence services to control Heron. Her final months, Diana's paranoia reached new levels, but it was paranoia based on real evidence. Her apartment was regularly swept for bugs. Diana told Paul Burrell, "They are trying to drive me crazy," but she was not crazy. She was a target of sophisticated psychological warfare. Intelligence services had good reason to target Diana. She had inside knowledge of royal family scandals that could bring down the monarchy. Diana's relationship with Dodi represented the ultimate nightmare scenario for the British establishment. The mother of the future king marrying a Muslim. If Diana had married Dodi and had children, it would have created an alternative royal family that could have overshadowed the Windsors. The British establishment could not allow this to happen. The decision to eliminate Diana was made at the highest levels. The assassination was carried out by MI6 operatives using techniques they had developed for other targets. The method was sophisticated, designed to look accidental, but the cover-up required cooperation from French authorities, British police, government ministers, and royal family members. The blood samples were switched to frame Henry Paul. The computer chip was removed to prevent analysis. Diana's body was embalmed to destroy evidence. For over 25 years, this conspiracy has been maintained. The official story has been accepted. Despite overwhelming evidence, it is false, but the truth is finally emerging. The evidence of murder and cover-up is now extensive. Diana's death was not an accident, it was execution. Assassination represents one of the most successful cover-ups in modern history. It required corruption of multiple institutions and systematic deception. Today, the same forces that killed Diana are still active. Prince Harry flight to America with Meghan echoes his mother's struggle. Harry clearly believes his mother was murdered, and the same people are now targeting him and his family. His dramatic departure from royal life, his move to California, his willingness to speak out all echo Diana rebellion. The parallels between Diana and Meghan are striking. Both challenged traditions and became more popular than other royals. But unlike Diana, Meghan had Harry protection. She was able to escape before the forces that destroyed Diana could complete their work. In his public statements, Harry has explicitly connected Meghan's treatment to his mother's death. He has spoken of the same forces and tactics. The story of Diana's death is not just historical tragedy, it is a warning about continuing dangers faced by anyone who challenges the establishment. Diana predicted her own death. She collected evidence. She tried to protect herself, but the forces against her were too powerful. The British intelligence services successfully assassinated the most famous woman in the world and covered up their crime for decades. But the truth cannot be suppressed forever. Diana's story is finally being told. The evidence is being revealed. The perpetrators exposed. Assassination was not random violence, it was calculated political murder designed to protect the establishment from a woman who had become too dangerous. Diana's death sends a chilling message about what happens to those who challenge power structures. If they could kill the most beloved woman and get away with it, what does that tell us? Diana wanted to be queen of people's hearts rather than Queen of England. In death, she achieved exactly that. Her memory remains more powerful than any living royal. She showed us that one person can make a difference, that compassion is more powerful than protocol, that love matters more than duty. Diana's revolution continues through those who refuse to be silenced. Her courage and authenticity inspire us to speak truth to power in a world where the powerful will kill to protect their secrets. Telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. Diana Spencer showed us the way. Remember her not just as a victim, but as a woman who dared to challenge the most powerful forces on earth. The truth about Diana's death is finally emerging, and with it, the proof that we live in a world where justice is a luxury the elite cannot afford. If this investigation has opened your eyes, please subscribe to our channel We create documentaries that explore the mysteries mainstream media will never touch. Leave a comment telling us what other investigations you want to see. We cover mysterious deaths, political cover-ups, government conspiracies, royal secrets, intelligence operations, and ancient mysteries. Thank you for staying with us through this complete investigation. Diana's story reminds us that truth always finds a way, even when powerful forces try to bury it. The woman who wanted to be Queen of Hearts achieved immortality through her courage to speak truth to power, and her legacy continues to inspire those who refuse to be silenced.